Hello and welcome back to another episode of All the Mods 9. Today we'll be exploring how to make our circuits cheaper. And before we get into that, something I did was I did upgrade our CPUs, just doubled the number of them, and I added another extended drive full of these mega item storage cells. Not that we need it, but it'll come in handy at some point, I assume. I went through the quest book and I grabbed every couple machines that I thought we would need today. I started crafting some liquid rubber just to have, and I'm making copper cable. So that'll be our medium voltage wiring or cabling. I'm coating it in rubber because if we look at the equivalent wire, you can see it loses 6 EU volts per meter, whereas coated in wire, it's only losing 2. We're just crafting a couple of those. Between episodes, all of our alloy blocks crafted, so we've got those ready whenever we'll need them. And I went ahead and I programmed all the recipes I think I'll need. And the first machine, first order of business here, is actually an LV machine. I know we want to get into medium voltage, but cheaper circuits are a priority. And to get cheaper circuits, we need to make the basic circuit assembler. Now, this LV machine, unlike every other LV machine, uses medium voltage circuits. So we're going to be, that's why we had to wait until now. And we're missing quartzite. Quartzite is used in the LV emitter, as well as brass rods and LV circuits. We've got some raw. It looks like we can just smelt it directly. If we look at our ore processing diagram, the byproducts we could get would be like barite, Certus quartz dust. We could also turn it into the gem variant, exquisite and flawless, by sifting. I think since we just need we just need the quartzite for now, I will smelt it. Now we should have a bunch of quartzite. So now we can finish our circuit assembler craft. I forgot it's already crafting. Hopefully, all of these are going to be waiting on the wire mill. I did want to craft some copper cable ahead of time. We still have need for LV tier circuits, primarily because they're a component in crafting the medium voltage circuits in 3 to 1, but also because we need the low voltage circuit assembler. And I think I'm just going to place it on this line right here. Doesn't need to be anything fancy, just connected with a cable. So we still have plenty of channels available. And this is only 3, so I can still put another 5 pattern providers, 5 components. All right, I'll be right back once we've got these things crafted and get a start on. There we go. The components have crafted. I got myself some copper cable, an energy converter, and now we can make the basic circuit assembler. The circuit assembler, like I said, is LV, so it has to go on an LV line. Connect this up to an existing one. We'll get ourselves a pattern provider. Grab a little bit of cable to connect pattern providers. And we'll configure this to automatically output and allow items input from the top. Now, recipes for our circuits we can take out of here, out of our molecular assemblers. Forget if we can also do the vacuum tube. Apparently in an assembler. That's good to know. I'll pin that, something to do next. We can take our circuits and we can use the circuit assembler. We need liquid tin or soldering alloy. This just uses 2 diodes, 2 LV circuits, and 2 copper wires. Before we were using 3, so it's a bit cheaper in that regard. Want to make sure this is on blocking mode so recipes don't get mixed up. And with this, we can now make 2 electronic circuits at a time. 2 LV ones, that is. Still only making 1 good electronic circuit at a time, but that's okay. For our liquid tin, we would just use an extractor on 10 ingots. We've got an extractor over here somewhere. Let's set up our assembler for vacuum tubes. All we need is red alloy. And here are the ingots. We will extract those and put in our assembler the vacuum tubes. We will just crouch, right click the air to clear that pattern. Very nice. Raw aluminum. It used to be aluminum and GregTech aluminum were not unified. So there was this whole clay line process to make aluminium. I think it was the spelling difference that got them mixed up. Oh, aluminium plates. Interesting. I'm going to trash these because we can't make them. An annealed copper bolt, that's quite nice. And some aluminum. Okay, let's set up in a new chunk. We can just set up right over here. Trying to decide if I like the cable just coming right out in the middle. I think I preferred that setup where it goes up against the wall. This time I made 16 amp converters instead of 8 amp. Gives us a little more room to play with. A couple more machines we can have running all the time. And we're going to start with the polarizer. Reason being is we need to make magnetic steel rods. And we could do this at low voltage. Take steel rods, polarize them into magnetic steel rods. However, we've got access to medium voltage, and the quest calls for a medium voltage polarizer. So we'll do it for the quest. I don't think it matters too much where I place this, so we can go right at the edge here and make sure the wire is connected. Now, if I craft a steel rod, magnetic iron rod, magnetic iron rods can now also be made in the polarizer. We don't have to use redstone. It's a quick machine. We're going to need a lot of machines here. We're going to need a new ore processing setup. This time it'll just be macerator, ore washer, and then sifter. There will be no thermal centrifuge or a second macerator. I'm not that clever with filters and item flow. So yeah, a new setup will be less work for me. I'm going to make lathes, mixers, electrolyzers, chemical baths, a new assembler, the chemical reactor, the brewery. We could make it at low voltage, but I'll make it at medium because we can. Looks like we'll need to use a compressor and a macerator and a distillery. And while I'm at it, I'll get the extruder. But I'll be back once we've populated this wall a bit. And a little while later, we have got a whole host of MV machines. I started placing some. I haven't gone through and started making patterns yet, except for chromium dust here in the medium voltage electrolyzer. This just takes chromite dust. So I started processing some of that, as well as vanadium magnetite. Looking ahead, we will need some vanadium steel, and that is mostly steel dust with vanadium and chromium dust. Vanadium we're getting from our, I believe, centrifuge. Yes, vanadium magnetite we can centrifuge to just vanadium and magnetite dusts. I processed a little bit of chromite, a little bit of vanadium magnetite, started getting that ready to go. But yeah, aside from that, I haven't done much. I placed an extruder and I put the rotor mold in it because making these rotors is messy. It's much easier to make them not with plates and rings and screws, but instead with just 4 ingots. And I'll take the mold out. So it's just 4 ingots make a rotor. And we can see this is in the extruder at medium voltage. That should make our life a little bit easier. I also went ahead and, looking ahead again, I saw we need flawless emeralds, we need ruby lenses, we need emerald lenses, and something not included in the quest book, we're going to need a sapphire lens because we need this ultra low power integrated chip. I think that's what that stands for. And you can see it's a silicon wafer with a blue lens or a sapphire lens. The blue lens, it shows us the sapphire lens. But the blue lens is something we would craft at high voltage, and we're just not there yet. So we have to go the route of the sapphire lens. You can see we can use the lathe, we can lathe a sapphire plate, or an exquisite sapphire. The exquisite sapphire is a low voltage recipe. Gives us a little sapphire dust too. And sapphire plates, we could use Ad Astra's compressor to just compress a sapphire into a sapphire plate. I wanted to go with the GregTech method, which would be to take a block of sapphire and a cutter, and this could happen at low voltage, to give us 9 sapphire plates. But then you have to make cobalt brass, and cobalt brass, we have to look at how to make the dust as brass plus aluminum plus cobalt. We've got all of that, but I just didn't feel like making blocks to make 9 plates at a time, and figured we could go the route of using the exquisite sapphires we can get by sifting the gem. We take purified sapphire ore and we sift it, and we get a 5% chance at exquisite sapphires. We can also get flawless sapphires, regular sapphires, and purified piles of sapphire dust. The same is true for rubies and emeralds. Actually, this is a low voltage recipe. We can run this at medium voltage. It's going to run faster. It's called overclocking. It'll take half the time, so it'll take 10 seconds, but it'll cost 4 times the amount of power. In general, it's better to make many machines work in parallel rather than overclock because of that increased power consumption. But we've got the fusion reactor for mechanism. We're making 400 million FE a tick. So we have, as a wise person once said, I've got the power. And since we're overclocking this, you can see the chance is 5% at low voltage. As we go up in tiers, that chance increases by an additional 1.5%. So actually, we've got a 6.5% chance of exquisite sapphires. And I just put 2 stacks of rubies, sapphires, and emeralds through. This router is set up just like the other ones. It pulls things in, and I whitelist what it can send and where. So it sends crushed ores to the ore washer, purified ores to the sifter, and everything else goes to our chest. It is being imported over there. And you can see we've already got some exquisite rubies, some flawless rubies, some purified pile of ruby dust. Yeah, we'll have all the rubies we need to make the ruby lens in no time. Same with the sapphire and the emerald lens. The other interesting thing about the emerald lens is we need the flawless emerald. The flawless emerald is used in making the medium voltage emitter and the medium voltage sensor. We need this emitter so that we can make the next tier of circuit assembler. That'll be handy. And the advanced laser engraver. We need laser engravers. Looking at the quest here, we can see the laser engraver with the lenses will let us make wafers. I don't know what ILC stands for, but I know what IC stands for. That's an integrated circuit chip. We take silicon wafers and we etch them with some instructions, I suppose. Then we have to cut those wafers into chips, and that's what's going to let us make our medium voltage circuit. No, sorry. That's what's going to let us make a new tier of circuit entirely to make the integrated circuit. But since I went ahead and grabbed a bunch of machines, let's collect some rewards, see what we end up with. A piston, very good. Resistors, annealed copper bolts. I still don't know what those are going to be used for. Machine casing, that's handy. Oh, very nice. An MV circuit. Some copper wire. An LV circuit. More wire. Nice. Steel plates, always come in handy. Let's start placing some machines down and putting in our patterns. We're going to need a macerator. I'm going to make sure to set these as I go to output into the pattern provider. I did configure my pattern providers to all be on blocking mode. A chemical reactor. Compressor. New arc furnace. I did have to make one pattern provider flat so that it wouldn't receive channels from the adjacent pattern provider. I just did that to simplify cabling, so I could easily send another 8 channels off to the right and left, for a total of 15 channels in use. And you'll see I've got a little cable anchor here to separate this cable from connecting to this pattern provider. Moving right along now. The mixer. I am setting the fluid auto output by right-clicking on the face that I want to set it on, in case that wasn't clear. And the item is by left-clicking. All right. There are all of our machines. The only thing missing in them is power. I went ahead and configured all of my cable to point into them, but for some reason when you place the machine, it does not detect that it has power coming in until you update the cable. Now that I've updated the cable, all of the cable is updated to send power into our machines, and I was able to update it by just adjusting the connection on one of them. I didn't have to do it for all. Very nice. So looking at our quest book, we need to make plant balls. Looks like we have a couple options here. Centrifuging is just a chanced output. I won't use a chanced output for this because that's hard to make patterns for. How do you say, on average, if you centrifuge 10 grass blocks, you'll get 3 plant balls? You can't do it. Instead, I'm going to tell my compressor if it takes looks like 8 of any plant, I'll say sugarcane. Oh, I meant to bookmark these. Begin our journey through to polyethylene. I'm going to hold off on silicon dioxide, and carbon. I will go ahead and take care of, but I won't try and make hot silicon yet because I noticed that this requires a higher tier blast furnace. It can still be on medium voltage. Sorry, the bottom recipe. It can stay on medium voltage, that's fine, but we need to upgrade the coil. You can see the temperature if we look at Cooper nickel coil. The highest temperature Cooper nickel can hit is 1800 Kelvin. This requires a temperature of 2273, and it says in brackets Canthal. So that's the lowest tier coil block that can process this recipe. So we'll need to make Canthal coil blocks. There is a quest update in the works to kind of rework this section right here so that you can see and go through how to make Canthal. We'll need Canthal, copper, aluminium, or aluminum foil. Canthal, if we click around a bit, we can get to the Canthal ingot. We can see that we have to use a chemical bath to cool this. We look at how to make the hot Canthal ingot. We need Canthal dust, and regardless of which recipe we go with, if we give it nitrogen gas or not, it has to be at high voltage. And our electric blast furnace is at medium. To get up to high voltage, we need to make the medium voltage energy hatch. We need to make 2. Same way we did 2 low voltage energy hatches. To medium voltage, we'll do 2 medium voltage energy hatches to make our electric blast furnace go to high voltage. But to get to that, we need to use this ultra low power integrated chip, which requires laser engraver, sapphire lens. So you see we'll get there. It's just a lot of work for silicon. The quest line is a little bit non-linear. I think that's only going to be increasing as we go forward. But like I said, there is an update coming. There's a pull request on their GitHub that fixes this silicon ingot to be a little bit clearer on getting Canthal first. Alright, with that all said, I'm going to program some recipes for some different components. We'll be right back. Voila, no time at all. We managed to make ourselves an advanced cutter and the advanced laser engraver. I say no time at all. This has taken some time. For example, the advanced cutter uses vanadium steel.
Each ingot you can see takes 80 seconds in our electric blast furnace to cook. It is not fast at all. And getting these lenses was 60 seconds because we overclocked for each one. And to top it all off, I still had to make the plates with the cutter. I did a couple of quests. I went ahead and used my arc furnace to make some annealed copper ingots. And this quest here, Resistors Revisited, is telling us how to craft 4 resistors at once. Sounds pretty good to me. Looks like we are still crafting them in our molecular assembler. Maybe we can do something about bolts while we're at it. Looks like we can cut a rod into 4 bolts at a time, or extrude an ingot into 8 bolts at a time. Our extruder is set up for rotors, so we might go the route of cutting a rod. And it looks like we can use water, we can use distilled water, or we can use lubricant. I did set up lubricant. I took the quest's advice of using tropical fish. It's kind of messed up that our extractor is taking tropical fish and turning them straight into fish oil, but I digress. The reason we want lubricant instead of water or distilled water is because recipes that use lubricant are faster. Nice. We get a small pile of gallium arsenide. A little bit of experience. And an electric piston. I did change my mind about compressing potatoes or sugarcane. I'm going to compress wheat instead, because I noticed we can get wheat by loot fabricating kobolds. 1 kobold prediction will get us 32 wheat. Everything else I looked at, for example, the potato, I could loot fabricate that, but I'd only get 16 at a time. I could also try and use a wannabe to farm husks or zombies. That's weird, this zombie's doing a backflip. But I don't want to get carrots too, or leather scraps for that matter. So I think I'll go with the kobold. And get a bunch of wheat. I could also use my wannabe to farm kobolds. I may do that as well. We won't do that right away. That'll be something to do next time. But you'll see in the compressor, it is set to use wheat. Have to be a little careful we don't go too crazy with this, because I use wheat to make toast, to make avocado toast. So we'll keep an eye on that. I also went ahead and made biochaff, biomass. If you brew biochaff with water, you get biomass. Then you can distill biomass into ethanol. We get some more biomass, always nice. We can chemical react ethanol with sulfuric acid to get ethylene. And mixing ethylene with oxygen makes polyethylene. We could use air instead, but then we have to collect air. And we already have the passive oxygen set up. So, the quest, this chapter is coming along quite nicely. I'm going to ignore the clay line because aluminum is abundant. We do not need passive aluminum. And we get, I think the other things you would get from the clay line would be like silicon. Let me just check. If I look at clay dust, the last step is electrolyzing clay dust. We would get silicon, sodium, lithium, and aluminum, and a bunch of water. I think the most important thing here is silicon, sodium, and lithium we can get from other sources. Like I think we get tiny piles of lithium from making salt water with gas tiers, and sodium we can get sodium hydroxide dust, which we are making because we are electrolyzing our salt water into chlorine and hydrogen. So, revisiting our resistors, the crafting grid will only give us 2 at a time, but it looks like the assembler can give us 4. If we don't have charcoal dust, so I'll ignore that one. We do have coal dust, glue, and fine annealed copper wire now. We also have carbon dust. Carbon dust, I'll show you how we're making that. I am electrolyzing 1 diamond dust to make 64 carbon dust. It's not a fast recipe either, but the output of 64 at a time is very nice. Let's see, this resistor recipe was low voltage. We can put it back in our low voltage assembler. Very nice. One thing I had to do to make vanadium steel was in my input bus, I had to set the circuit to setting 1. This does pose a problem for us because now we need to make this monocrystalline silicon wool, and it needs to be on program 2. I believe silicon dust on program 1, if we had the higher tier coil, would make hot silicon ingots, which is why we need to specify program 2. So what we'll do is I'm going to make it work with both program circuits at once. I'm going to take my program circuit and I'm going to just right click with it in the air and select 2. Then I can put that program circuit into my input bus. Since these are copper nickel coil blocks, they're not Canthal, I won't be able to make hot silicon ingots. So I should be okay to now program this recipe. We've got plenty of silicon dust from oxygen production. Let's try and order monocrystalline silicon wool. Let's try and order 6. Seems to have worked. Oh, right. It's going to take 450 seconds to make 1. But once we have that 1, we can start upgrading. 'Cause, 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 'c Yeah, we don't have the six I ordered yet, but we do have four. I did a little math. It turns out making six of these is going to take like 45 minutes. So let's go ahead and just keep moving rather than wait for all of those. Gives us some silicon dust. I did make the ingredients for this. Gives us coal and glass. It looks like it wanted us to do a different route, like using mortar and coal to get coal dust and then centrifuging that. But the nice thing about GregTech is you don't have to follow any one route. Let's grab some silicon wafers. We'll make 16 at a time. Go straight into our cutter with some lubricant. That's going to make the silicon wafers. Twenty millibuckets of lubricant. This stuff goes a long way. With that, we get some more. We need to make RAM wafers, ILC wafers, and we need to make those ULPIC wafers. With 20, we're making 3 of these. We'll do 6 of each. I did set up patterns for these where I took the sapphire lens out, or the lenses out, because they're not consumed. One day we can make one laser engraver for each color lens. But we're not quite there yet, so I definitely lied. I didn't realize this would take 45 seconds, so we'll just make one wafer for each one. Make our lives a little easier, at least at the start here. And then we can just set it up for 6 and walk away after that. Once it starts to craft, you do not need to keep the lens inside, which is quite nice, I think. Grab our ultra low power integrated circuit wafer. We can turn that into chips. It'll make 6 chips from one wafer with a little bit of lubricant. There's the RAM wafer. I'm making sure I put all these in my inventory just so I can get the quest completion. We'll make 32 of these. You can see RAM stands for Random Access Memory. The last one we should get is the ILC. I must have forgotten to make... Oh, it's just called an IC chip. Sounds like the joke from Futurama, the very first episode. There's our RAM chips, our ultra low power integrated circuit chips, and we'll soon have our integrated circuit chips. Gives us more wafers, which is always nice. A lot more wafers. Finally, we have all our chips. Looks like the next stage for us is not on the quest book. It's actually in the extreme voltage chapter. Or maybe it's in the high voltage chapter. We need to make 2 MV energy hatches. I already made the patterns for this, so I can just order 2 right away. You can see it's just some aluminum wire that's been through the wire mill twice to make medium voltage coils, some aluminum plates, some copper cables. Nothing too fancy. All stuff we're very capable of doing. There it goes. And we get a polyethylene sheet. That's pretty nice. We got 5 of them. Those will come in handy later. You can see we've done a couple of quests from HV without even realizing it. We've made some salt. We made salt dust and cyan dye and got some more salt. We made chlorine already from salt water. We made hydrogen from salt water. We started a couple quests in EV. We made Kanthal dust, just gives us some chromium. Up next is to make the Kanthal ingot to start making Kanthal coils. Which, I could upgrade our electric blast furnace, the one that we have over here. But thinking back to the low voltage quest where we made one, we could just make a new one for medium voltage, which I think I will go ahead and do. I don't see any reason not to. We've got our medium voltage energy hatches. I made plenty of copper nickel coil blocks. All that's really left is the machine casing. Input bus, input hatch. The actual controller. The output bus and output hatch. The muffler hatch. All very easy things for us to make. And the maintenance hatch. Once that completes, we'll have ourselves a new electric blast furnace. And this one will be at high voltage. I think I'll mirror the setup I did before and just place it off over here. Voila! We've got ourselves a high voltage electric blast furnace going. This thing is cooking up some Kanthal for us. I ordered 16 Kanthal coil blocks. So I make the Kanthal. Well, it comes out as hot Kanthal. Hot Kanthal has to be cooled. We cool it with our chemical bath. Just a hot Kanthal ingot and water is how you cool it. I set this up the same way I set up the other blast furnace. Also on program 1. And yeah, we're using storage buses on the inputs, an interface attached to the pattern provider, as well as a storage bus on a separate subnet attached to the pattern provider with interfaces on the outputs. Each Canthal ingot takes 45 seconds to craft, and it turns out when you order 16, we don't have the chromite dust for another 16, but if we did, you need 2 stacks of Canthal. 2 stacks are 128 times 45 seconds each, is a little bit over 90 minutes. So, been running around doing a few things, but I think this is where we're going to call it, at least for this episode. If you've been enjoying it, thank you. And, yeah. Hope you have a lovely evening, day, night, what have you. Bye bye.